Welcome to today's book review. Today we are talking about Phenomenology, Metaphysics, or Method by Gerhard Funke, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's a German university professor from, I don't know, the 1960s or so, probably longer than that. There's not too much on the internet about him, and the way I came across this book was really by chance about 10 years ago in a used bookstore, and the cover, just this simple plain green cover, and then the name Phenomenology just really stood out and interested me, and I'm very happy that I did get it because it was a good introduction to a lot of philosophical ideas that I'll be getting into in this review. Phenomenology is the study of structures of consciousness experienced subjectively, focusing on how individuals feel, perceive, and interpret lived experience. In this book, Funke argues that phenomenology is more concerned with methods of science to understand its subjects rather than metaphysical understandings, which is not physically observable. Because this book was translated from German to English, and there being a lot of German phrases and terms used throughout it, I had to look these up as they're used almost every other paragraph. For example, life world, it's always in quotation marks, life-world, and that essentially means the pre-given, our instinctual matter of fact understanding of things. You might think of it as common sense in another way. The other term that's used a lot is Dyson or Daisen. I think it's a German word. And Dyson means essentially the essence of being. Is that right? Dyson refers to the existence of being, the methods used to solve the innate tension that these two ideas pose to one another. There are philosophical methods called ontology, which studies the essence of being, or the nature of being rather, and epistemology, which studies how we know things. It was actually these ideas of ontology and epistemology that inspired me to make my video about the Bible, because I believe that the Bible answers those questions of ontology and epistemology better than any other source for a given worldview. Funke would not make the same assertions about the Bible that I do, because as he states in the first chapter of this book about what is philosophy, he has this to say: phenomenology, as the science of grounds within the domain of appearances, always deals with phenomena of every kind and with the conditions of their phenomenality. It interrogates metaphysics of every dogmatically posited metaphysical position. And to the idea of dogmatism, he says in his chapter, Dogmatic Knowledge, that the philosophy of consciousness begins topically somewhere. However, it does not reach the completely absolute, nowhere utopia. Constantly revising its positions, it will prove to be atopical. So accordingly, phenomenology and philosophy as a science can't look forwards or backwards to hold on to or project a specific worldview, or as he would label a dogma. It is specifically and always in the here and now, analyzing and questioning and critiquing the grounds of something, and with each passing moment needs to always stay in that process to stay a scientific method. About philosophy, he states in his chapter called Reflective Consciousness that it is perfectly accurate to say that philosophy does not have problems, but that it always is a problem to itself in this way, one that is always historically renewed, and it is a problem to itself insofar as, in uninterrupted sequence, it examines the attitudes taken in consciousness dogmatically, thetically, and positionally, trying to ground them, whereby it first understands and grasps them in thoughts. In his chapter, Suspension of Horizons of Conviction, he states that phenomenological description, which does not ask what an X truly is, but rather simply presents it in all aspects and strata so that what it really is all about becomes evident, is always just a preliminary stage to scientific work. Now, it would be easy to discount all this type of wording and thought processes as just word salad and intellectualizing for the sake of intellectualizing. But where I find value in the phenomenology, philosophical, scientific approach is in the art of debate. Because so many modernists take for granted morality and ethics as a given. But when you do a little bit of interrogating using the laws of logic, you quickly discover that these types of arguments and worldviews are not naturally predisposed to morals or ethics that create a just society. It is not, as Funke would put it, life world, that people are just and fair to one another and practice mercy, turning the other cheek, treating one another as you would like to be treated is not a pre-given. That gets into I believe it's the David Hume idea of you can't have an is without an ought, which is a topic for another time after I read David Hume's work, an idea that I'm very interested in because it runs along the same line of argumentation and leads back to the same conclusions. The biggest negative of this book is that the method by its nature is very illusory, so it's always having to cycle and regress to question the grounds of its knowing. I found my brain many times while reading it overheating and needing to put it down to decompress because people don't talk, think, or write like this anymore. So to hear somebody who can talk at length about these very minute specific details is refreshing. That type of depth in thinking and writing is something that has been lost that we should come back to, but is difficult in our instant gratification scrolling age. Very hard to concentrate in the same way that he probably was able to when he was writing it and thinking about these ideas himself. Funke does address the necessity for some determination to be able to talk about being and life towards the end of the book in his chapter of What is Appearance, when he says, even being can be spoken of only in a determinate sense. Determinate context of experience leads to determinate sense of being. And that's why, like I discussed in my book review on the Bible, I believe that in the final analysis, the spiritual is more important than the temporal, or as Funke would put it, the metaphysical is more important than the method. And that's because while I do think that the epistemological knowledge of how we come to understanding is important, because if you don't have that grounding, then you are more likely to lose it in the future. It is more important to first ontologically know the reason of your being. And the reason of your being, I believe, will lead to the knowing of where the being and the knowledge from the being came from. Essentially, go from the tree of life to the tree of knowledge, not the other way around. The other reasons that I talked about of the method being useful in the realm of debate, because I do believe that war, it is fought with our words, with the pen, and to come against worldviews that are dangerous and problematic to humanity, that you do need to have that understanding of phenomenology, epistemology, philosophy. All these things work together to as like a sword, like different weaponry, and are there to be used, not abused, and not placed as a priori, but definitely as strategy for ultimately progressing our understandings of why we're here and what we're supposed to do while being here. And somewhere or another comes back around to the purpose of why we're here, the meaning of life, who you are, things that you can watch some other videos to get a better idea of where I stand on those things. But this was a great book for me to get an introduction to ideas that really come from people like Immanuel Kant and Husserl and Heidegger, other German philosophers throughout the 1700s and 1800s and 1900s that are just ideas that have been lost with modernity, and I think probably primarily with the poison of postmodernism. Not a super fun book to talk about because it was not a super fun book to read, but certainly enriching. I would appreciate if you guys give this video a like, comment, and subscribe to let me know that, I don't know, I should keep doing this. And if you want to continue and follow along with the book reviews that I'm doing here or any other content and support my filmmaking, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. That is all.